Monday Huddle, a Black Monday edition. I guess appropriately, Bo, we wore our black colors. Did not do that on purpose, but always a weird and busy day in the NFL for sure. Adam Hoge, Bo Brack coming your way as we recap the last Sunday of the regular season and have a bunch of coaching news to talk about as well. What's going on, Bo?
I'm kind of a little bit in mourning, but also it's the bittersweetness of a season pretty much in the rearview mirror officially for the teams you and I respectively cover. Of course, we've got a couple exit interviews, some press conferences. Already started talking to a couple of the Cardinals players today. Trey McBride, Hoge, just unreal season for the Cardinals. 110 catches, 1,100 yards, just an unbelievable year. Talked to him, talked to the quarterback yesterday. So, you know, the Cardinals certainly have a lot of questions to answer this offseason, but I think they answered some things as well, going 8-9, finishing 3-3 in the division. But, you know, you look at yesterday, and it's one of the weirder days, along with like the opener, the finale. It's just, you know, some of the teams just not playing for anything. You got the Chiefs basically resting everybody. So you're trying to find the games that do have some sort of meaning. And, you know, I think that, you know, last night, obviously you had, what a statement by the Lions to take that one from the Vikings in an impressive fashion.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that one a little bit. As we always do, I want to start with our best and worst of the weekend in this edition, week 18. I think my best and the worst are the same thing, to be honest, this week. There's a really cool moment, 36 seconds left. Buccaneers headed to the playoffs, and Mike Evans, who's, you know, probably one of the more unheralded great wide receivers that we've ever seen. For some reason, the Bucs have been relevant, so you know, he really should be, and he will be a slam dunk Hall of Famer in my opinion. But anyway, he needed 5 yards to get 1,000 yards for the 11th straight season. The only other wide receiver in the history of football who's done that is Jerry Rice. So it was a big moment for him. And the only problem was that the game was over. There was 36 seconds left. The Bucs are going to the playoffs. All they needed to do was kneel, and they run a play to get him the catch. And really, the best part of this for me was just the reaction to see how his teammates mobbed him. Huge celebration. Just one of the cool moments to, you know, outside of the team wins and losses that you're going to see. You see how much they respect Mike Evans, and we're really feeling it for him in that moment. So that was what was the best. The worst is there's a world in which they could have cost themselves the playoffs by trying to do that. Now, I didn't match up the exact time codes on what was going on in the other game with the Falcons at that point, but I think it was still a game in that moment. And, you know, it seemed like everybody watching knew what was going on. So I don't know if the Saints just like let him have that moment, which would have been fine considering, you know, what Mike Evans means to the NFL. But could you imagine, Bo, if they had like brought extra coverage over there, understanding what was happening, picked it off, and there's a pick six going the other way? I mean, that would have been incredible.
Yeah, it would have been catastrophic as far as the Buccaneers and trying to hit that $3 million incentive for Mike Evans and keep his streak going as far as 1,000-yard receivings, no doubt about it. No, I think that was definitely a great moment. You know, universally, you know, Mike Evans. Is there anybody that doesn't like Mike Evans? He's just one of those kind of quiet guys. Reminds me a lot of Larry Fitzgerald, kind of under the radar, but even what Evans has done, no matter who's throwing him the rock, over 1,000 yards receiving, an impressive run here to start his career and into carrying into late into his career, and then also do it for some winning teams. He's played on some good Bucs teams over the last couple seasons. So I got to give my flowers to the team you cover. The Bears go up against the Packers, and albeit without Jordan Love, they were not going to lose 12 straight to the Green Bay Packers. They would not be denied. And they win it in dramatic fashion, 24-22, and tried to give it up, right? There's a late fumble and it goes the other way, and the Packers look like they're kicking the go-ahead field goal. But then the Bears, they finish it off. What was your thoughts on Caleb Williams' final performance of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I was there. I went up to Lambeau for this game. The locker room was pretty excited, as you can imagine.
I mean, DJ Moore's comments, those are all time.
Yeah. They just he was asked, what does this mean for next year or the future or whatever, and he was just like, "We beat the Packers, F them." So, it's an interesting thing, Bo. I mean, this is obviously one of the more storied rivalries in football, but it's been so one-sided. I mean, obviously the Packers have won 11 in a row, but I believe it's also 26 out of 29. So you go 26-3 in a rivalry over, what is that, 15 years then? Doing the math on that one. That's not really a rivalry. So I think from the Packers side of things, they've kind of moved on to the Vikings in terms of like their hated rival. You start to talk about like sort of, lack of a better term, like generations of players that come through a locker room over that time period.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, while the Packers have maybe turned their attention to the Vikings, the Bears, on the Bears side of things, they're still like bitterly upset that they never win this game. It means something to them. So I think it's kind of in a weird way become a more meaningful game to the Bears than it has the Packers, who are just so used to beating up on the Bears. So for them to get that victory, especially when you add in the context of what happened earlier this season, they had a game-winning field goal set up at Soldier Field. It gets blocked. Same exact situation plays out yesterday at Lambeau, and instead this one goes through. There's a little bit of redemption there for Cairo Santos, the kicker. Matt Pryor on the offensive line, who was kind of the one who gave up the pressure on that kick back in November against the Packers. So there were a lot of different storylines to this. Of course, of all of them that matters, Bo, Caleb Williams leading a drive down the field. He's done this multiple times this season, and finally it pays off. Finally it results in a win. They've had so many weird things happen, whether it was what happened against the Packers. He did it against the Vikings, but then they lost in overtime. He did it against the Commanders. They blow it on the Hail Mary. So there's so many times this season where it's sort of overlooked what Caleb Williams has actually accomplished because the end result has been L's. So to get the win, I think there's just multiple layers to it, but that's probably the biggest thing that can carry over to next season, Bo, is just you're able to get that win against your rival. Caleb Williams is now 1-1 against the Packers and, has really put him in position twice to be 2-0 against the Packers this season. It was a feel-good ending for what's been an absolutely dismal season here in Chicago.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to deny that the Packers are a dangerous team here in the NFC playoffs, but it is shocking to see that they are one blocked field goal away from going winless in that division. That's crazy to me. Given all the success that they've had over the last 2 years, I'm going to sneak in one more best of Week 18. How about Bryce Young? Bryce Young, 5 total touchdowns in the game that you mentioned that had something on the line for the Falcons. They needed to win that game. They couldn't. The feisty Carolina Panthers down the stretch, I saw it firsthand. They beat Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, ended their season, but they officially ended the Falcons season before the Bucs got that dub. Bryce Young, 251 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and then on the ground, 24 yards and 2 tutties. You got to really you talk about Caleb Williams and maybe some momentum going into the offseason. In the year 2, Bryce Young had just a brutal rookie campaign last year as the number 1 overall pick. People were just roasting the Panthers for passing on a guy like CJ Stroud. And then Bryce Young, he kind of his resiliency coming through being benched in place of Andy Dalton and then coming back and having the finish to his sophomore season like he did. I think Bryce Young had a nice little exclamation point to his second season and improved that he can be a good quarterback in this league.
Yeah, if you're the Panthers, you got to be feeling a lot better about your situation with the way the second half of the season went, specifically with Bryce Young, who's turned into more of the quarterback I thought he would be. I thought there was always a ceiling there with him because of his size, and I was always a little bit of worried about injuries. But coming out of Alabama, there's no doubt he could read the field well and execute an offense. And I think finally with the right coaching, he's in a much better situation. So you got to feel good about that for the Packers. I'll throw out one more honorary worst which goes back to Lambeau Field. I thought it was insane that Christian Watson played in this football game. The Packers were in this weird spot where they probably should be playing their starters, but you didn't know if it was going to matter because it depended on the Commanders, and then they're losing most of that game in Dallas, so it's kind of a weird spot to be in. But I thought it was a situation where you kind of pick and choose based on individual situations. And for Christian Watson, who missed time with a knee injury, did not practice on Wednesday and Thursday, and then was limited on Friday, I was really surprised to see him play. And then he, who knows if it was related or not, if he's favoring it or not. But he ends up, according to Ian Rappaport today, tearing his ACL non-contact injury in that game yesterday at Lambeau. So that's one that just felt unnecessary. And meanwhile, Jordan Love got hurt in that game too. It sounds like they survived that one, but that also could have been catastrophic and is a little bit of an asterisk on the Bears' victory that Malik Willis played the rest of that game after there. But yeah, just another one of note. Well, I want to turn our attention real quick to what happened last night, Vikings and Lions. Interesting game. The Lions on the scoreboard dominated. They're back to being the Super Bowl favorite. I think the question here is what to make of the Vikings, who we've talked a lot about on the show, and we've been believers. And I'm not sure I'm out on the Vikings. I missed the first half driving home from Green Bay. I was listening to the Vikings radio network. Paul Allen, Pete Bursish, they're one of the better tandems to listen to because they're not afraid to hold back their real feelings. They were crushing Sam Darnold in the first half of this game. So I haven't seen all the tape at this point, but just listening to that broadcast, the team broadcast, it sounds like Sam Darnold just missed so many opportunities in the first half that this could have been a completely different ball game. That's kind of how I piece it together. So it might be easy to assume that it's such a catastrophic loss that they might, lose this coming week in LA, who they already lost to the Rams this season. Yeah. I don't think I'm out on them, though, at least for this week. I just think they're too well coached, and I think that they can bounce back. It just sounded like there were too many missed opportunities that they really actually had a chance to win that game yesterday.
They absolutely did. It was a tighter game than I think the final score kind of indicates there, 31-9. But, it was, unfortunately, the worst performance of the year from Sam Darnold. You're right. As far as inaccurate, and this is a guy that was consistently accurate, one of the more accurate throwers of the football in the league this year. He was making big splash plays, threading balls all season long. He couldn't make a throw to save his life last night. 18 for 41, 166. Everything seemed like it was sailing high. You have to keep in perspective, Sam Darnold's he didn't turn back into a pumpkin last night. I think he's fully capable of continuing what he's done in this career resurgence that he's had. Last night's game was huge. Detroit came to play. Detroit is one of, if not, it is, as you said, the Super Bowl contender of the NFC. That was a home game for the Lions. Probably the biggest football game in 50 years for the Lions with the division on the line. It was loud and it was a hostile environment. And Sam Darnold had a horrible game. But, can he go on the road with in a lukewarm environment against Rams fans who, it's probably going to be mostly Vikings fans, in this, maybe 50-50 split there in LA. I think Sam Darnold has a great opportunity to get back on track. It's not just show up and win, as he said, but I think they've got a good opportunity to bounce back, especially off their loss. But, yeah, Sam Darnold unfortunately didn't perform last night. But I think he absolutely has the ability. I think he deserves, a make good after last night's performance.
Well, I don't think anybody in the league has a bigger game than Sam Darnold does next week. In terms of what's on the line, because I saw that comment there, and it's right. That the Lions had him seeing ghosts, which was always the knock on Darnold, right? Isn't he the one who even said that he was seeing ghosts back in the day? So
right.
It's been a remarkable job by him and Kevin O'Connell this year to get him on a track that most quarterbacks don't recover from when that really does seem to be the issue, when you're seeing things that aren't really there. And just listening to the radio broadcast in the first half again, I watched the second half. I was home for it, but it seemed like that was the problem. So
yeah,
if you are a team that's like, am I going to give this guy $50 million? I want to see him bounce back in LA this coming week, because if he finishes this thing with back-to-back performances that look like the old Sam Darnold,
right?
Boy, that makes life hard for the Vikings to make a decision. It makes hard, probably we know this league, somebody else will pay him because there's enough of
it's
a
not going to
sample
dry
size
up
there
his
from the
market.
season.
There's just so many quarterback needy teams out there.
But I can see that being a mistake, Bo, because he ends up in a situation that's not as good as he's been in this year, with not as good of a system, with not as good coaches, and now he's got a huge contract hanging over him too. Like, we've seen that go wrong before. So I just think
Let's keep in perspective, though, Hoge, at this time last year, Sam Darnold was starting a meaningless game for the 49ers. Like, he was just, there, get us to the playoff quarterback. And now, he's playing for the division and on Sunday Night Football. And he doesn't he's 27 years old. Can, you think of a bigger game that Sam Darnold has played in? And it's not like an excuse for him to play as poorly as he did, but still, he wasn't playing games like this for the Jets or the Panthers or the stint with San Francisco.
I mean, we talked to him at the Super Bowl last year on media night. He was one of the guys just sort of standing around by himself in the middle of the floor. That, anybody want to talk to me? So we went up to him and we were just talking about anything with Sam Darnold, who at that point you're wondering, I don't know if this guy's going to start a game the rest of his career. And so it's been remarkable to see the season he's had this year with the context of, having that conversation with him at the Super Bowl. So, I don't want to take anything away from what he's done. I just think there's a ton on the line this week for him individually, and obviously for the Vikings, who have a much tougher road now. They're going to have to win 4 games or have to play on the road. If they win this game, they got to go back to Detroit, who have lost to twice this season. So we knew last night's game meant a lot. And on the flip side of this, credit to the Lions, because, Alex Anzalone obviously means a lot to that defense, because he comes back and all of a sudden that defense looked a lot different than it had in the last few weeks.
What do they have, 12 players on IR? Excuse me for...
Which is why they needed the bye so bad, Bo. I felt like they needed it more than the Vikings. I think most people saw it that way. And so that was an enormous game for them, and I think that they're feeling really good about their road to get to the Super Bowl, getting that win yesterday. I felt like the Lions had a better chance to lose this week coming up had they lost last night than the Vikings. Some people might bail on the Vikings. I'm not going to bail on the Vikings this week.
No, I'm not either. I've seen the Cardinals took the Rams down the wire at home. I think that the Rams, obviously, with that passing attack, can play with anybody. A nice upstart young defense, but I don't think they're ready for the Vikings coming in on the road. I think they can pressure Stafford and make him look pedestrian in that contest.
Yeah. So the fallout of the results yesterday, we talked about the Bucs getting in, the Packers losing. That put Washington into the 6th seed. Just any reaction overall to, we're going to get into a little bit more detail. This weekend was kind of a disappointing slate of games, considering what could have been on the line for so many of these teams. And really, it was the Falcons 2 weeks ago that screwed that up, because the Falcons had managed to beat the Commanders. There would have been a lot on the line in the NFC across the board. But the way it played out, I still think we get some pretty good matchups this coming weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look at this. There's some exciting games on tap in the wild card round. It always proves to be one of the better weekends of the playoffs. I'll contend that the divisional round is probably your best weekend of football, because you weed out some of the teams that kind of snuck in. We'll talk to Hank from DMVR and see what the vibes are as far as rounding the Broncos. I think they've got a tough matchup coming up. But yeah, it was very, very anticlimactic, especially when what was on the line potentially for Joe Burrow, and all the talk that goes on Saturday about what the Bengals can play themselves into, and then they have to pray to the football gods, come Sunday, that Carson Wentz and the Chiefs, a ragtag bunch of second and third stringers. Can they beat Bo Nix and the Broncos? And that game's not even competitive. It's 38-0. So it was unfortunate. You really had to kind of find, you really had to scroll Sunday Ticket closely to find anything that meant something yesterday.
Well, here at All City, we got two teams that did make it to the playoffs, one of them being the Eagles, PHLY, and the other returning to the playoffs for the first time since 2015. The Denver Broncos get in for DNVR. We bring in Hank right now. Look at it. We're going like full around the horn style in our studios right now with our logos behind it. I like it. We got the good vibes. Hank, man, give us tell us what's going on in Denver with we'll get to the tough matchup in a second, but before we move ahead, how's the party going in Denver with the Broncos getting back in the playoffs?
Oh, we're partying, and it's awesome. And I know some people like Bo are waiting for next week when teams like the Broncos get weeded out. But here in Denver, we're having a lot of fun. After the game yesterday, it was just electric. I think starting with like the 2-minute warning, that's when Bo Nix told Pat Surtain he was going to take the victory lap, give the high fives to the fans. That's when they started playing jump around. On the video board, they're saying, the Chiefs don't actually play in Kansas. They play in Missouri. Talking about Chiefs-aholic versus the barrel man. It was all sorts of good stuff. A lot of dancing, a lot of football players getting up into the stands with fans. It's just good vibes because the Broncos hadn't been to the playoffs since 2015. Nobody at all expected them to make the playoffs this year because, it's a rookie quarterback. You look at what they were last year, and then the difference between last year and this year is that you lost Justin Simmons. You lost Jerry Jeudy. Obviously replacing Russ with Bo. It wasn't supposed to go this way. And the fact that Bo was the one who was able, not you, Bo Nix was the one who was able to lead the Broncos in his first year as the starting quarterback to the playoffs. The vibes are just so good because you can see the upward trajectory. And at this point, you're playing with house money because in a lot of ways, yesterday was the Broncos Super Bowl. So they're champions right now.
Ride the wave, man. I don't think anybody was confusing which Bo was responsible for the Broncos.
Just making it clear
there. But and did you say Chiefs-aholic, like the guy in prison for knocking over a couple banks too?
Oh yeah, no, they were going up showing the comparisons between the two cities, between the two teams, and one of them was, who's your fan? Broncos had the barrel man, Chiefs have Chiefs-aholic, so.
It really is not a really story, though. It really is. I mean, 4.5 wins, according to the over-under as far as going into the season, less than the Raiders going into this year. Like, there was no confidence. You had, you were in salary cap hell. You just got rid of Russ. You brought in Bo Nix, who was the sixth quarterback off the board. I mean, who do we truly credit for this Broncos turnaround in their run back to the playoffs?
It's Sean Payton. I think that what he has done this year is incredible. And he's not going to win Coach of the Year. There are just some great candidates. You look at what's happening with the Vikings right now, although last night was a little bit disappointing. But what Sean Payton did this year was just remarkable work. And there's so many little details. You look at this week, Marvin Mims has the 2 touchdowns. Last week, he has the 2 touchdowns on the deep ball, including the jump ball between 2 defenders that pushed that game with the Bengals to overtime, gave the Broncos a chance to win. Marvin Mims was pretty much out of the rotation a month into the season. What does Sean do? Plays him at running back, gets him a little confidence, gets him a little momentum, and all of a sudden you're seeing him break out. And there's just so many stories like that. Players growing, players playing the best football they've ever played. And that comes down to coaching, because I still look at this team and say, you're as excited as we all are in Denver, you wound up with 3 Pro Bowlers. And there were some snubs, Zach Allen, Quinn Miners, some of those guys who should have gotten in. But to me, it's the coaching staff, and Vance Joseph deserves a lot of credit. The work that he has done on this defense. This is one of the best coaching jobs we've seen in Denver in a long time. It's almost like Wade Phillips back in the day, the Super Bowl 50 run, back when he was the assistant coach of the year, running that no-fly zone defense. Broncos defense has stopped just about everybody. They're stopping the run. They're getting the passer. 68 sacks this year, most in the NFL, an absurd number. Most in Broncos history, more than when they had Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware on the Super Bowl run. The secondary, turning Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, Brandon Jones, PJ Locke, guys who I don't think a lot of the viewers on the show still know who they are. Vance Joseph, Sean Payton, and of course, Bo doing his part. But again, I think that's mostly Sean too. The coaching has just been incredible.
All right. This is to both of you guys, then, because you both know Vance Joseph. I'm already seeing this morning.
Yeah.
Jets are interested. The Bears might be interested in interviewing him. I don't know how seriously I can take that, but Hank, we'll start with you since he's there in Denver right now, and of course was the Broncos head coach once upon a time. Well, if Vance Joseph were to get another opportunity, how do you think it would go?
I think he isn't the most exciting candidate. I think that he brings a lot of things to the table. Everybody who's played for him loves him. I guess everybody in Denver. I'm not sure if that's the same case down in Arizona. I wonder if he's the type of coach that could get a team over the top. He isn't a Nathaniel Hackett, though. I think that he'd be a pretty middle of the road type hire. I think his time in Denver didn't go well. That was also a time when the talent was declining because you're in that post Super Bowl 50 era, the quarterback questions. You're kind of watching guys like Von Miller age out and then get traded. Aqib Talib, end of his career. Chris Harris, end of his career. And the big thing here was that he wasn't allowed to hire his own coaching staff. That was all John Elway who hired his staff. So if you give him that power, you give him the experience he's had, the work he's done on the defense, to me personally, I don't love the idea of hiring a guy who focuses more on the defense right now in the modern NFL. It just seems like you kind of have to go the other way, especially since most of these teams are going to be teams that have questions at quarterback. He wouldn't be the top of my list, but he's more than deserving of these interviews, though. And he could steady the ship for a team that needs to be steadied.
Yeah, I actually echo what Hank's saying here. I mean, that when the Cardinals had a vacancy and VJ just finished his tenure as DC, there was a lot, including Budda Baker, that wanted him to get a shot at being the head coach. He's beloved by his players, no doubt about it. And also I'm always reminded of Sergio Dip, the ESPN announcer. Vance Joseph is having the time of his life back when he was the head coach of the Broncos. And I think Henry's right. I mean, he never got a fair shot. They were in quarterback purgatory during the VJ days there in Denver, and he never got a true shot at it. But I do think that there's a ceiling. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is his first top 10 defense of his coaching career. So it hasn't consistently been there. I think that he's a good coach as far as entrusting him as the head guy. And you got to imagine that there's a ceiling there as a head coach. But I think he can continue his success as a DC during his run in Denver.
All right, let's bring it back to the Broncos and what's ahead of them this week. Obviously, you get in the 7 seed. It's not the easiest matchup in the world. Having to go to Buffalo. And I don't know if it's moved. I did see 8.5 being the early spread in the game. What's the level of optimism? How are we feeling? I get the sense that it's house money and all that. But is there a realistic path to upsetting Josh Allen and the Bills on the road on Sunday?
I think there definitely is. Again, I think that a smart bettor would probably say, just give me the Bills to handle business here, because you look at what they've done on offense, what they've done on defense, the talent level, the quarterback, it's a home game for them in Buffalo. There are a lot of signs that point Buffalo's way, and you can't just discount any of that. To me, the path, though, is for the Broncos defense to get to Josh Allen. And you have to get to him while containing him, which is a tough thing to do in the NFL at this point. So if they are able to speed him up, if they don't let him escape the pocket, I think that kind of lays the groundwork for the offense to handle business. And I'm not sure what the strategy is offensively, because I think sometimes you look at a game like this and say, let's go heavy, let's get into 12 personnel, some power running, and just try to control the clock, stay in this thing, and then win it late. I also think that with Bo Nix playing the way he's playing right now, and the fact that throughout the season, a lot of his best moments, his best work has come from empty formations, empty shotgun formations. Do you just go out there and try to jump the Bills early and try to play with a lead? I'm not sure what exactly they do offensively, but everything certainly starts with the defense finding ways to slow the Bills down, which has happened at points this season. So there's a path. The Broncos beat them 24-22 last November on Monday Night Football. A great game. Cortland Sutton, incredible catches. It's certainly possible. 7.5 points, though, 8.5 points, that's probably fair.
Was that like the beginning and the end of the Russ days? Was that they beat the Bills? Was that going into the infamous bye week?
Yes, that was going into the infamous bye week. That was their third win in a row. They'd just beaten the Chiefs and the Packers, I believe. And then they continue that run. Would have had a great shot at the playoffs if they just could have beaten the Patriots in a game at home where they were 10-point favorites. And then they just would have needed to handle business against the Raiders. Would have been a playoff team last year. Instead, they were not, once again. That changed this year, though.
This Bo Nix, seemingly the guy. You feel like he's the guy, the future. I think he's proven that, right? Does it ease the pain of passing on Josh Allen for Bradley Chubb and having to face him and probably him dismantling the Broncos?
Yeah, I mean, it used to get probably once a week, somebody in the mentions on Twitter would say, hey, they could have had Josh Allen. It's like, yeah, we all remember. That doesn't happen as much now. It's like once a month now. So things are going pretty well. He is the future. I think you look at yesterday, sure, it's a backup defense, but just the way that he played, like there was just like an aura about it almost. It's almost what Joe Burrow did to the Broncos the week before, where it's just like, this guy's open for 5 yards, bang, got him, bang, got him, over and over and over again. And that's what quarterbacking comes down to in the NFL. And you look at Bo, well, he missed the one throw right before halftime. So he was 18 of 19 at halftime, finishes 26 for 29. It's just methodical. He's just carving that defense up. And again, those are backups for the most part. It's going to be different this week. But, when you're seeing coverages the way he's seeing them, that counts for something.
Yeah. I'm curious to see in this matchup if Nix can find anything downfield. I mean, Buffalo just loves to keep everything right in front of them. It's frustrating to watch if they're going to allow Nix, drive the ball downfield like he's done pretty well the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm curious as well, especially because when they run those downfield routes, that's what's opening up a lot of the lanes for him to scramble. So you run those routes downfield because it opens up the passing underneath. It also opens up the rushing lanes underneath. And I think that in a game like this, you need Bo to run, because that's been the biggest surprise from Bo all season, is that he is as athletic as he is. And even the Broncos coaching staff has said, we didn't expect him to be able to move the way he does. So I think that you're going to need some of that. I think you're probably going to need to hit a couple deep shots, and Cortland Sutton is covered. Doesn't matter. You throw him the ball. But for the most part, it is just taking those 5-yard gains, and Bo's playing great ball. I mean, second most passing touchdowns of any rookie ever. The passing yards way up there. The total touchdowns also second all time. Like, by every statistical measure, this has been just an outstanding season from Bo. And the best part is he's getting better at the end. And so it's just so easy to get excited right now.
I'm going to end this by going back to the Chiefs-aholic thing.
I love that.
And end this with a fun little anecdote for you guys, because if you haven't seen it, there's the Amazon Prime documentary on what's been going on with that fan, the Chiefs-aholic, who's, probably going to jail for a long time for robbing a bunch of banks that funded his fandom. So one of the guys interviewed in that, one of the Chiefs fans they interview, one of the other, diehard fans that they interview throughout the documentary, the guy, I forget his name, but it's the one with the beard. Least surprising thing ever. That guy is like best friends with Greg Braggs Jr.
Really?
Yeah. It's like like he's like his neighbor for 10 years.
It's so on brand.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah. So and it is a good watch if you get a chance to check it out. Well, Hank, good luck to the Broncos this week. However it goes, it's been a great season, obviously, for the Broncos, and pretty much everything you guys could ask for, given the expectations. And I think they'll give them. I think it'll be a good game, regardless of the outcome. I think they're going to give the Bills a little bit of a scare with how they've been playing, and they're obviously well coached.
Yeah. No, if it's all on Bo. There's been no running game all season. If Bo can do it, and Bo can do it. Bo Nix, to be clear.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Bo can do it too. He can.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Hank. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's get into
plays, man. And they've got a defensive player of the year candidate in Patrick Surtain. I mean, that should be. We'll see if they can keep it close. I mean, 8.5 points. You look at that in any playoff scenario, you're tantalized to throw some money on it.
Yeah. And I could also understand teasing down to a much more manageable number for the Bills and feeling pretty good about it too. Just basically get into a Bills victory. At the end of the day, I'm always going to take, the MVP over a rookie quarterback. As good as it's been for Bo Nix, it is the playoffs. It's Josh Allen at home versus Bo Nix. So, hey, I want to get a lot of the coaching stuff. Before we do that, though, let's get our initial thoughts on how everything shook out with the playoffs. We got a playoff bracket to throw up on the screen and discuss a little bit. I'll say this, that I think I think that there's a few really intriguing match. I honestly think the Bills and Broncos is one of these, Bo. I just don't like how the Steelers are playing right now, so I got to feel good about the Ravens. That Texans Chargers game, it's always like that. The Texans always playing that early Saturday game in wild card weekend. It feels like every single year,
Right.
but I think that could be a good one. I don't think the Packers are that good. I've kind of come to that conclusion. I don't know that Jordan Love is that good, which is kind of an interesting takeaway I had from yesterday. Now, I don't mean to say that he's not good. On the level of their previous quarterbacks, I do not think he's the next Hall of Famer that's coming up behind Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to be more of like a Baker Mayfield type career, which is good. A guy you can definitely win with. And speaking of Baker, they'll get the Commanders. That could be a really good game too. But again, kind of the same deal. At this point, I think I'd take Baker Mayfield, the veteran, at home over a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And then we'll see how that Rams-Vikings game goes on Monday. That's one of the better games of the weekend as well.
Let me just say this. I think that the NFC bracket is way more intriguing than the AFC. I think outside of that Texans-Chargers game, it should go pretty chalk as far as the AFC goes. But I really like, I think that this 3-6 seed between the Commanders and the Bucks, and I know they matched up way back in Jaden Daniels' debut. It's been we've seen a lot of football since then. It's a coin flip between the Bucks and the Commanders. And I thought, way back in week 1 to open up the entire season, like Philly and Green Bay and Brazil, that was a tight contest and absolutely has the ability to be as well this upcoming week. And I'm with you with Jordan Love. Like there hasn't been that performance where he's gone up against a good team and done what he really does well against bad teams and bad defenses. I think he does a good job in beating up on those teams, but can he rise to the occasion like his predecessors? I think that's a fair question. And then that 4 or 5 seed between the Vikings and the Rams, we talked a little bit about it. Like Darnold has to show up, and he's going to have to, he's going to have to flush last night's performance against the Rams team that I think is flawed, but has every bit of ability with Stafford and that passing attack and that up and coming young defense to get it done at home against Minnesota if they don't come to play. So I'm really excited about the NFC. AFC, like I expect the Bills and crew to kind of punch their ticket to meet Mahomes in the second round, Jackson to take care of business against Russ and the struggling Steelers, and then we'll see. I mean, I think I've got an inkling that Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert probably get it done on the road against the Texans. That's probably like the more of the coin flip game in the AFC.
Yeah, I think the 3 teams kind of trending down right now would be the Steelers, the Texans, and the Packers. Is how I would look at that. Interesting note with the Vikings, they lost to the Rams earlier this year at SoFi. Now that was on a stretch of 2 games in 5 days, but also it was losing to the Lions and then immediately followed up with a game against the Rams. Now, at least it's not a short week this time. There is a thing, though. Someone was tracking this recently, and I've sort of lost track of it, and it's now just popping in my brain. We may have even discussed this earlier this season. I feel like we did. That the teams coming off playing the Lions really struggle. And probably because of the physicality and the way they play and things like that. So that is a hump that the Vikings are going to have to get over, losing this game in Detroit yesterday and then having to go out west. At least they get a full week to prepare, and obviously, and they actually get an extra day because it's on Monday. But yeah, that's always tough, and I think that's one of the bigger toss-ups of this wild card weekend coming up between those two teams. Any other final thoughts before we move on?
No, I mean, the Lions thing is very real. Like, we've seen that consistently. And now I don't know if that's just like they've lost a lot of their physical players, especially on the defensive side of the football. Maybe that ease, but like by their performance last night, you saw that the Vikings got manhandled for the most part from the Lions. Can they bounce back? Can they avoid the fate of most of the teams that the Lions have played, the next week, falling short again? There's enough data to say that that's not nothing. So, but I'm excited. I always love this wild card weekend, and I'm sure we'll be talking, at some point, after this wild card weekend about, a game going a different direction than anybody anticipated. It's just tough to forecast right now.
Well, this is an all NFL Black Monday Huddle edition today. So we did want to touch on the coaching moves, the moves that haven't been made, the moves that were made, what it could all mean, how these things are starting to sort out. Black Monday always like around 8 a.m. this in our time zone here in Chicago.
Yeah.
That means it's even earlier for you, Bo, around 7. I'm sure the tweets start flying. You see what's going on. We did get some early moves yesterday. The Patriots firing Gerard Mayo right after the game, and that was a huge domino to fall. That impact, it was big here in Chicago because I think a lot of Bears fans have their eyes on Mike Vrabel. I think Mike Vrabel would do wonders for what the Bears need to get fixed in that locker room. And I just look at that move and I'm like, that just seems to me to have Mike Vrabel written all over it for him to go back to New England, get his second opportunity. And so before we move on past that point, just your reaction to the Patriots firing Gerard Mayo after just one season. And if there's anyone else besides Vrabel you think would be a good fit there.
I think Vrabel it just makes too much sense. I know they passed on the opportunity last year, and that was something that Bob Kraft, I think, took responsibility for. That he thought that too many teams were going to identify Gerard Mayo, had already done so as far as a future head coach, and he didn't want to, relinquish that. So he made the move post Belichick. And I don't know if you ever want to be the guy following the guy, right? That's like an old adage in like media, but it also, when you're following Bill Belichick, those are big shoes to fill. And Mayo, I think you didn't see with a young undermanned roster outside of Drake May, I think the progress that you wanted to see, the lack of competitiveness, I think that you can point to and say, hey, it just wasn't there all season, and we didn't see enough to continue this thing on with Mayo. So I think it's the right move. Like if you know he's not the guy, just cut the cord now. And if especially when you've got some candidates, especially somebody like Vrabel, who's got a history with the team that can potentially come back and do what he did, where he made his way. I believe he won a Coach of the Year at one point with Tennessee, and kind of continuing his career on as a leader of men in the Patriots, and have some sort of semblance of the Belichick way, the old Patriots with the new mentality going forward.
Yeah, I started thinking about this midseason about how this just seemed like a no-brainer for the Patriots to move on from Mayo and go back to Vrabel. Now, I will bring up one more name because I personally just find it really interesting. No inside information here other than we did find out that the Patriots are going to request to interview this person. But let's not ignore the Drake May part of this. Yeah. And he, I feel like, sort of flew under the radar among these rookie quarterbacks this season and may have been actually the most consistent of all of them, quite frank. I'm not saying he was the best, but he seemed like he may have been the most consistent from the time he started playing. Ben Johnson is going to be very selective. We know this now. It sounds like he's not interested in the Jets job. He's not even going to talk to the Jets. Sounds like the Jags are a real opportunity and the Bears. Patriots want to talk to him. I just wonder more from, like, if I'm the Patriots, I probably go the Vrabel route. Just makes a lot of sense. But if I'm Ben Johnson, is that Patriots job, that might actually be the best one. It just depends on how he feels about Drake May versus Caleb Williams, I guess. But you got more stable ownership there, in my opinion. History of winning. There's a lot of different factors that go in it, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Like, is that an under the radar? All of a sudden, Ben Johnson and that Drake May pairing, because I could see them having a lot of success together.
I think inconsistent quarterback play won't scare off Ben Johnson. Obviously, what he's been able to do with Jared Goff. If you're talented, I'm sure Ben Johnson's a confident coach, unless he sees some dead, some big red flags. But, look at the teams that he's interested in and look at the teams he's not interested in. You said no Jets, right? That quarterback position is such an unknown in the future for the Jets. But, Lawrence is in place in Jacksonville, Caleb's in place in Chicago, and then Drake May potentially in the Patriots. I think that's a big part of where Ben Johnson wants to go. And you're right, he's going to have to decide, which quarterback he feels like he can mold and move forward with. But I'm sure he's got the confidence that he could take any of three of those guys in order to do it. So Patriots, Jags, Bears, Jets, Saints. Saints don't have a future quarterback in place, so you could probably take them out of it. And that's I think an advantage as far as when you're working the coaching carousel. Do you see somebody that could be a consistent quarterback soon to where you can get the results necessary to keep the job that you just got?
So if the Jets and Saints aren't in the Ben Johnson sweepstakes, a name that's come up this morning a couple times that I find fascinating because of the connections here to Chicago, obviously, but it looks like Matt Nagy will get a look there with those jobs. And perhaps why you should take this seriously is Mike Borgonzi, the assistant GM with the Chiefs, is probably one of the bigger GM names that's going to be out there in this cycle. Now, it is interesting. The GM jobs are not opening as of this moment. Trent Baalke did not get fired in Jacksonville, which is kind of a whole nother side story. So it's really
But the head coach is reportedly going to report to Khan, the owner, not Baalke, which is that's insane. Talk about just saying, hey, we're dysfunctional without just outright saying it.
Well, and it felt like to me that was, now people forget this. The Packers did a similar thing when they fired Mike McCarthy. Maybe it was the opposite way. It was maybe the year before they fired Mike McCarthy. They brought in Gutekunst, but Gutekunst went directly to the team president, Mark Murphy, and McCarthy went straight to Mark Murphy as well. And I think was sort of a lame duck situation. You could see the writing on the wall, and then he was let go. So it's a little bit of the opposite of that. But regardless, that was not a ringing endorsement for Trent Baalke. If you read that statement from Shad Khan, I felt like it left the door open potentially to if a Ben Johnson comes in there, it's like, no. I want my own GM that they could still make a move there. But for now, they're keeping Baalke. In the meantime, in terms of Matt Nagy, if he's paired up with Borgonzi somewhere, I think that could make a lot of sense. Now, my one worry would be the quarterback spot because he struggled with Trubisky and they couldn't really figure that out. I would think he needs to be married. He kind of, I don't want to say lied, but maybe embellished his love for Mitch Trubisky when he took the Bears job, and then it quickly eroded. So there's got to be conviction there on the quarterback front for I think that to work. That being said, even when Nagy was fired here in Chicago, he showed enough promise to me early on and then made some rookie mistakes as a head coach in the years that followed when adversity struck, especially after the double doink in the playoff game against the Eagles. That kind of really seemed to take the wind out of his sails. And I always felt like if he got a second opportunity, it could go better. So I wouldn't immediately dismiss Nagy as a viable head coaching candidate should he get another opportunity.
Yeah, it's going to have to, obviously, it's going to be in the eye of the beholder. And it's surprising to me, Hoge, the lack of vacancies. I think there was at some point during the season, people were expecting, anywhere from 7 to 8 vacancies. And now what are we looking at? 5 officially as it stands here.
And we're waiting on the Raiders, although apparently Antonio Pierce did talk to the media. And no one would ever have the coach talk to the media and then fire him after, right? That would never,
Never
that would
happens.
never happen. No.
Never happens, even though it happened right after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But right as it stands, Pats, Jags, Bears, Jets, Saints. While the Giants, they sent out the statement saying, keeping our GM, we're keeping our head coach. I think Dable is a good coach. I think that's the right move. I'm shocked. And we talked about this last week, like on full display during the Hard Knocks, it was a Joe Shane gets to keep his job there in New York. But no move there. And it looks like the Cowboys they've got a couple weeks to make a decision to hire Mike McCarthy or re-sign him because he is a coach free agent. Do you see McCarthy getting any interviews potentially? Like, you don't even have to ask permission to do that, right?
Yeah. Well, they do have an exclusive window because the contract doesn't expire. I think, what is it, the 14th? So he cannot interview elsewhere right now, but once that contract expires, he's free to go interview wherever. So yeah, they got a little bit of a window here to work things out, or if he hits the open market, that could change things. So yeah, and remember, last year, I see the thing is, if there was going to be a surprise firing, I would have been looking at the Colts. With Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen and Jim Irsay came out last night and said that they're good. But last year it was Vrabel on Tuesday. So it was a couple days after the season ended, and then that surprise hammer came down. So there's always a chance of that. I just don't know that there's really any more of those situations left out there. I want to ask you one more question before we run out of time, though, because it could potentially involve the Bears here in Chicago. But it was put out there this morning that the Bears have requested to interview Cardinals OC Drew Petzing. That one sort of was not expecting that. Seemed a little surprising to me. What can you tell us about Drew Petzing that would make him a good candidate to be a head coach, and also what that could mean if he were to be paired with Caleb Williams?
I mean, he's an extremely organized guy. I think he is, still viewed, and it's a polarizing subject here in Arizona because of, I think, what people viewed was going to be their strength this season. Their offense, I think, fell short throughout the season. But this is a guy that, is an up-and-coming play caller in the eyes of, Jonathan Gannon, the Cardinals head coach here, and has a lot of respect around the league. He's held some, every position on a coaching staff dating back to his Vikings days, wide receivers coach, tight ends coach, QB coach in Cleveland, from the kind of the Kubiak, Stefanski coaching tree there. And I think he does an unbelievable job dialing up the run game. I think he's an elite kind of run game offensive coordinator. But where we've seen the Cardinals struggle is really kind of getting the downfield passing attack going. But Drew Petzing overall, like you look at the stats and you'll see that it's very complimentary and looks nice. His 2 seasons here, especially considering that he's got Kyler coming off the ACL last year, and then before he had to get 4 quarterbacks ready to play in Kyler's absence, and was able to do wonders with a guy like Josh Dobbs, just to kind of keep the Cardinals offensively above water here. So, I think Drew Petzing is certainly a guy that is going to probably, if he stays here in the desert, which is more than likely, continue to get some interviews, maybe this time next year. And we'll see, like, if somebody's willing to take a chance on him. I think he still needs some seasoning as far as, commanding that side of football and then growing as a leader in the leadership qualities that you want from your head guy. But our guy, somebody you've had on your show consistently, and Brad Spielberger identified him last year as a future head coaching candidate. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon, but I think it's still kind of early in the process. He's still a 36-year-old offensive coordinator. I think he's still got some time to get some, to kind of mature a little bit and do it here in the desert, because, we've got a source here on our show that there isn't going to be any kind of move from Petzing as far as their primary play caller on the offensive side of the football.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if that interview does happen and how it goes. But never hurts to talk to young, under the radar candidates. Certainly worked out for the Minnesota Vikings when they landed Kevin O'Connell. So, people forget kind of where he was in that coaching cycle, and they had Jim Harbaugh in the building, and they're like, no, we like this KOC guy. And it's worked out pretty well. And with one of the better hires of the last, 5 or 6 years or so. Bo, awesome stuff. As always, we're going to keep it rolling here during the playoffs. As long as there's playoff games, we'll be breaking them down here, and I can't wait. I feel like I'm more excited for the playoffs this year than I have been in past years. So I like having the 6 games the first weekend. I think it was a good move by the NFL, having it go across 3 days. Plus, we get 2 college football semifinals Thursday, Friday, wild card Saturday, wild card Sunday, a game on Monday. I have to take some vacations, lost some vacation days with the wife and family to be able to watch it all. I don't know how that's all going to work, but it should be fun, Bo.
Yeah, it's like the Star Wars meme where you've got poor Natalie Portman thinking you're saying something else, and my wife's like, "Oh, the season's over, so that means we get you back on weekends." And I'm like, I still might be locked into some wild card divisional round football the next 2 weeks, but I'll reintroduce myself to you and my son in a couple weeks. But no, I think the parity really has people excited about this. There really is, of the 14 playoff teams, I think you could really realistically make the case maybe for 10 teams that could win the Super Bowl potentially.
Yeah, it's possible. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it. I'm gonna go run because we got CHO Bears coming up in 1 minute. So if anybody wants to come over and watch the Bears show, we'll be doing that on CHO. Come check it out. Everybody should be subscribed to the YouTube channel, All NFL, and of course the podcast as well, where we keep it going here. We got plenty of coaching news, playoff games to talk about coming up. For Bo Brack, I'm Adam Hoge. We'll talk to you next week.
We all silly like the mayor.